Cats are going okay.
I think they're back.
Because it's going to be there.
We took them to that today because when you get them from a shelter, they allow you to take them to a vet, but they give you the names, and my vet happened to be one of them. So we went back today to make sure it really works.
Dear friends, thank you very much for being here tonight. We have just some very short announcements. April 16, we will be back here in this room with Minnie Estrada. She is the very helpful and personable crime prevention specialist with the sheriff just next door to us here. Crime in Lemon Grove is not the cute, funny thing it used to be in the 50s and 60s. Now it is knifings, beatings, armed robbery, and other horror. And Minnie has a lot of practical statements to make. One of the big ones, I know she'll repeat this, is don't assume you can deal with something. Never assume that. And the sheriff is always very quick to say that. So that will be at 6:30 to 7:30, just a good tight 1 hour, right here with Minnie Estrada. We have a book coming out in August, Todos Iguales, All Equal. I'm using the editorial we. This is a good friend, Christy Hale, who has written and illustrated a book about the 1931 segregation case. I can hear you say, as who has not, because it is a very popular subject. She has done a stunning job. We have been right there with her for 1.5 years. And it is geared to younger children. That is something we haven't had. I have done a unit with 8th graders because a case of this kind is really too much for somebody 8 years old. All you take in is somebody was mean to us when we were little in 1931, and she's done it very, very well. So I look forward to trotting out the book and having Christy here for a book signing. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. We are also rooting for our own Estelle Lauer. You may remember her book, Kanaga Diary, Lost in the Aleutians in 1938. She won the bronze from the Military Writers Society of America. And she said, well, it's not the gold. And I said, don't start with me. Aluminum, tin, these things are all good. This is all good. And so she's up against enormous competition nationwide. So that was very, very thrilling. And we are hoping that that becomes One Book, One San Diego, included in that group, because one of the criterion must have a local connection, and this is all local all the time. So we're very excited for her. Alex Beville will be here in welcome. We're feeling better. Hey, everybody in our crowd has been ill, but we're better. Alex Beville will be back in May with a very interesting topic, the Garden of the Dead at Presidio Hill. And is it still there, and why isn't it, and what are they doing? And Alex is on the job. And that sort of does it. We're going to talk about how the Matoon Act nearly killed Southern California development. So here we go. In 1925, life in California and America was good. People had money and little taxation. World War I was over, baby boom going on, mass production, mass consumption created a roaring economy, hence the roaring 20s. And our favorite, Calvin Coolidge, President Calvin Coolidge said, you know what he said, the chief business of the American people is business. They are profoundly concerned with producing, buying, selling, investing, and prospering in the world. That's the whole quote. Your average take-home pay in 1925 was $3,269. In 2019 dollars, it's right in the zone, but not in California, $46,207. I think you can just barely make it here on something like that. There were 20 million cars on the road in 1925, 80% of them made by Ford and General Motors, average cost, $265. Cars were a national obsession, especially in California. As you can see, a typical traffic jam at 7th and Broadway in the always deplorable Los Angeles. Yes. California country roads and many city streets were narrow, unpaved, unlighted, and dangerous. These examples, you know the old plank road of myth and legend across the desert from Arizona. The muddy road to Ventura, what a nightmare that is for that old Ford. The road to Whittier, you're in the middle of nowhere, literally. And my favorite, the winding 20-mile Grapevine Ridge route to San Diego. All of them are a nightmare for the motorist. So wouldn't it be nice, after a bumpy, dusty road, to find a comfortable place to stay? Enter the world's first motel. The Milestone Motel opened at San Luis Obispo in December 1925, and it stayed in business until, are you ready for this, 1991. It was located near an on-ramp to US Route 101. This motel cost $8,000 to build, charged $1.25 a night, and it was intended to be the start of a chain. California's population was booming in the roaring economy. It had grown from 1.5 million in 1900 to 4.7 million in 1925. Big families with cars needed more schools, more homes, more infrastructure, most of all, more paved streets for all those cars. So the California state legislature wondered how to solve these problems. The answer came from Everett Warren Matoon, then counselor to Los Angeles County. He proposed a sweeping, visionary legislation called the Acquisition and Improvement Act, or Matoon Act for short. It passed in May 1925 in the California legislature to public acclaim. The Matoon Act was born in Los Angeles County, long a byword for corruption and congestion. The Matoon Act, however, was well-intentioned, but badly thought out and eventually indefensible. Corruption, angry taxpayers, political warfare, and stalled development were the result. So Southern California ground to a halt. Though literally driven by LA County traffic congestion, the Matoon Act engulfed all of Southern California. This famous 1920s shot of Broadway in San Diego shows lines of cars parked on either side and a trolley track in the middle. Early warfare between mass transit and the siren song of booming auto sales. So, what did the Matoon Act promise? It would build infrastructure in towns, cities, and rural areas and connect them all with well-lighted, well-paved roads. Plus, there would be sewer systems and a whole network of new water pipes. The sunny Southland, doesn't this look tortured, was divided up into improvement areas, local authorities had vast power to create these areas that cut across city and county lines. In San Diego and suburbs, Market Street, Broadway, El Cajon Boulevard, and others were built between 1926 and 1929. But as early as 1927, landowners smelled a rat. 7 men formed the Matoon Act Relief Association, a nonprofit corporation run by owners of land in Mattoon districts. The unpaid board of directors included 2 people from Lemon Grove, August Fells, who with his wife Augusta built the famous Fells Ranch on Massachusetts. He basically was Massachusetts Avenue. He owned thousands of acres. And poor Sanford Eckler. More about him in a minute. You had no say in what would be built where, but you would pay and pay. This tortured 1920s tax chart shows how much the rich paid on $100,000 annual income and upwards. If you made $5,000 a year in 1925, and a lot of people did, that was a typical take-home pay for the year, you paid $13 in taxes. But the Matoon Act changed all that. Enter the infamous ad valorem tax. That's Latin for added value. Millions of dollars in bonds were issued to pay for construction costs. Ad valorem meant that there was added value to your little part of paradise. You paid the bonds. Your $13 tax was suddenly raised into the stratosphere. And if your property straddled several of these improvement areas, you were taxed for them too. Here's a map of La Mesa, Lemon Grove, and Spring Valley. Your land could be, as that black circle shows, in all 3 areas. You're out of pocket, maybe $1,200. It's a lot of money in 1925 if you're earning $5,000 a year. If you couldn't pay your taxes, no big deal. Under Mattoon, the rest of the owners in the improvement area would have to pay them. It gets worse. A lien was placed on your property for non-payment. That was public information, of course. Everybody knew who didn't pay. You stopped upkeep on your property. The value of adjacent properties was affected negatively. Your neighbors are angry with you. They're furious. Here are a couple of true stories. The widow, Ethel Kuntz, in Spring Valley, was assessed $1,200 for her 4 acres, more than it was worth. She stopped paying the tax and quit-claimed her property to the irrigation district. Others did the same. The district, overwhelmed with quitclaims, filed a class action lawsuit against the county and state. Result? Many people got their land back at the tax sale, like the widow Coons. She ended up paying $250 over 10 years. That was her tax bill. A teeny victory for the taxpayer, as we shall see. Here's the nitty-gritty. Henry Abercrombie, poor Henry, lived in Spring Valley in 1927. His area had 10 households. Henry's taxes went up to $1,200, and he didn't pay them. So his tax bill was split between the other 9 households. Clarence McGregor lived next door to Henry. Clarence paid his $1,200 tax bill, then suddenly got another bill for $133.33, his share of Henry's bill. Clarence was stuck. He's getting $5,000 a year. He couldn't pay the extra 133, so that bill that he couldn't pay was split between the other 8 households in the improvement area. Now stay with me. Down the road lived Dolores Maitland. Dolores paid her $1,200 tax bill. She paid her $133 share of Henry's bill. Then she gets a further bill of $16.66 for her share of Clarence's bill. And so it went on and on. You get the picture. This was a pyramid scheme. That's when each paying participant gets a high rate of return by recruiting other participants. Only in Mattoon, only the bondholders and some politicians got a high rate of return. Taxpayers got zip, but heartache. Pyramid schemes are illegal in the US, yet they exist even now in disguised form. Who was not a victim? The developers. They used public money to build sewer lines, lamp posts, parks, sidewalks, and streets into their new housing developments. And in that cast of characters was a Canadian plumber and contractor, Florence Kasler. She benefited from the Matoon Act while she developed 1920s downtown LA with some 60 high-rises. Here's one of them today. The beautiful Beaux-Arts Bendix building, preserved as an art and design space by the LA County Conservancy. Thank you, Florence. You made a fortune and you got off scot-free, but there's more to the Florence story. We'll get to that. Things got so bad by 1928 that Everett Matoon tried to get the act modified or even repealed. He realized his good name would be on the act forever. That's all he heard, the Matoon Act, the Matoon Act. You know what happened on October 29, 1929. The Great Depression finished what the Matoon Act had started. Home ownership plummeted. Property plagued by Matoon Act tax hikes, and liens could not be sold. People had literally nothing. Yet solving Matoon would drag on into the early 1940s. Matoon affected even the least of these. As children developed rickets, something in a third world nation, they had rickets because their parents couldn't afford nutritious food. Parents ground up beef bones and made marrow patties in an effort to nourish their children. In 1931, the Matoon Act was actually repealed by the state legislature. But the nightmare wasn't over. For some 56 distressed improvement areas in San Diego County, San Diego prosecutor James Abbey, our hero, managed a $2.6 million fund that had been authorized by public vote to buy up the bonds, make them go away. But it's now 1934, and the suffering continued. The San Diego Sun ran article after article, noting that the bondholders demanded payment, and if property owners couldn't pony up in 5 years, they'd lose at a tax sale. to other bondholders. But the state finally recognized the full horror of the Depression, and remember, the grapes of wrath, people are pouring in, and refused to allow such tax sales in 1933 and 1934. The San Diego Sun begged the bondholders to settle and, quote, start the wheels of progress again. It's 1935. A deal is in the works in San Diego County. Let license plate fees, gasoline, sound familiar? And personal property taxes pay for the new highways used by everyone with a car. And in return, the state would retire the bonds on arterial streets and roads. This meant only pennies on the dollar for taxpayers. San Diego County would collect $300,000 it didn't have, and people would be out from under. Was this deal going to work? January 1, 1936, the new year opens with another plea to bondholders to accept 50 cents on the dollar set by law, not the 65 cents they really wanted. Half a loaf is better than no bread, said the San Diego Sun. Tax delinquencies have reached an astonishing 63%, the paper continued. Settle, do it now. The nation was reeling from the Depression. All of the San Diego papers pleaded with bondholders to accept a deal, noting, quote, the property owners simply cannot pay, and the bondholders will be glad to salvage even a small part of their investment. So now it's January 1938. Everett Matoon, second from the right in this photo, confers with a who's who of leaders on sabotage legislation to sabotage the Matoon Act. Our local hero, James Abbey, is standing second from left. And guess who's in the middle? Earl Warren, later the Supreme Court Justice. They opened the door to success. Now it is still 1938, but it's April. San Diego County has pulled it off, wiping out the Matoon Act blight from over half of its 56, remember the 56, delinquent assessment districts, with more to come. El Cajon Boulevard, Euclid Avenue, 70% of Teensy Lemon Grove, more benefited from those efforts. The efforts of James Abbey, who appears not to have slept in 8 years. A big fire was planned with San Diego State College student Catherine Hunter, queen of El Cajon Boulevard, presiding, and the Hoover High School marching band opening the program. You can't make this up. It's so good. It's still April 1938. It's April 26 at 7:30 p.m. The El Cajon Boulevard Civic Association set fire to $40,000 worth of Matoon Act bonds in a vacant lot on the corner of 67th and El Cajon Boulevard. In 2019 dollars, 40 grand is $700,000.
Wow.
Who lit the fire? Colonel R.G. Rutherford, second from right in the front row of this photo. He was president of the association, and he had slaved. I mean, this man killed himself for 5 years on behalf of 500 property owners along El Cajon Boulevard to College Avenue, and he raised 50 grand to cancel the Matoon bonds. He was a hero to his people. That same month, in Lemon Grove, oh, I forgot to mention, Rancho Santa Fe burned their bonds. I don't know who this is throwing his bonds. on this tremendous bonfire. But can you imagine the taxation in Rancho Santa Fe? Pretty bad stuff. So that same month in teensy Lemon Grove, where poverty and desperation reigned during the 1930s, the San Diego County Matoon Act bond program allocated 29 cents on the dollar to buy up bonds that had halted the growth of the San Miguel and Monterey Heights districts in the little town with the big lemon. 29 cents was the magic number. In 1940, right next door to Lemon Grove, the Rolando Village Company wiped out its remaining bonds, hampering the whole Rolando neighborhood, which was then running south of University Avenue to the border of Lemon Grove. The border of Lemon Grove was different then. This is before San Diego took a bit, and La Mesa took a bit, and now we're with what we've got. Rolando had been a poster child for stalled development and competing annexation efforts. La Mesa wanted Rolando, well, they didn't get it. After 15 years of horror, the peasants had revolted and won. With World War II looming, San Diego County would enter its boom years, and California was back. So, what happened to Everett Matoon? Here he is as a very young man. He died in 1956, age 65, and was buried in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. He was widely viewed as a valued civic leader, distinguished lawyer, World War I veteran, reliable friend, and all-round good person. He was the Los Angeles County Council, as I mentioned, from 1925 to 1938, spanning the act that bore his name. This decent Iowa native has lived in infamy while never intending harm to anyone. You all have heard of the Wild West. The Matoon Act was wild. The rest is history, and I thank you for listening. Does anybody have any questions? We have a microphone here, and it's over here. And who has a question? Anybody? Yeah.
It was the Mr. Rutherford, the one that had started Rutherford's restaurant that's still on El Cajon Boulevard?
The very same. Thank you, Evelyn, the woman who would know this. The famous Rutherford's restaurant, isn't that JFK and the big photos on the wall inside? Yeah, he had that property. He was a businessman, and he owned a lot of businesses that he started at a time just when everything was going to go south. Other questions? I'm going to mention something, if I may. I mentioned Sanford Eckler. Lena and Sanford Eckler landed in Lemon Grove early in the 1920s. He had a 20-acre citrus ranch. He had a rabbitry, a rabbit in every pot. He was raising plump, tender rabbits and selling them to people. He also had Sanford Electric, which was a little company. So he was putting in the knob and tube that then we were furiously removing from the museum. He lost $30,000. He lost his ranch. He lost the business. He lost the bunny rabbits. He literally could not afford to buy the feed from Mason Feed, which was a Lemon Grove company, and they had been around since 1891, and they were working with people. This is a small town, everybody knows everybody, and they were selling feed to people for like next to a nickel. And he could not afford to feed those bunny rabbits, so he was selling them off for pennies. So that is a real story. It's a sad story. August Fells, who had, God, he must have been pushing 1,000 acres, really what is all of Massachusetts Avenue, and I'm sure you know that that avenue was named by Ed Fletcher because he came from Massachusetts. August Fells built his lovely big Victorian house, which is there now but threatened, in 1895. And he was raising hay and potatoes and strawberries and chickens and fruits and vegetables of all kinds, you name it, he was raising it and selling them. So of course his taxes went into the stratosphere, and that is why he was one of the people on the board of directors of the Matoon Act Relief Committee. He emerged from all of this intact. He had a lot of family money. They were German immigrants, and they landed in Lemon Grove by way of Pennsylvania. There's a big family, and one of our longtime members is on the whole Fells story because she lived in that house for so many years. So we keep getting emails from Ancestry.com saying there's another leaf, and they found, you know, the great cousin something 50 times removed. And so we're getting the whole story of the Fells family. We thought they were connected to the Fells naphtha fortune, but that was just a lie, so forget we ever said that. We thought we had traced them, but it's a whole other branch of Fells, is apparently not that unusual as a German name. So, I mentioned Florence Kasler, who was the developer in Los Angeles. Florence did not make out like a bandit. She lost everything. Yeah, it was really bad. There she was making money and using OPM, other people's money, to build those 60 high-rises, and great-looking stuff, classy looking stuff. But she did not do well.
So because of the Depression?
Yeah, the double whammy of taxation. And it was really Southern California, not all of California. There was a very good question asked when I gave this presentation on March 30th at the Congress of History, and I did not answer it well, and I was thinking after, what was I thinking? A man asked who were the bondholders and who authorized the bonds? Well, of course, the state legislature passed the Acquisition and Improvement Act, known as the Matoon Act. But you get various holding companies and subcontractors who contract with the state. Can you imagine the corruption? And they post the bonds, and they land in the Wall Street Journal. We did have the, what is our local Wall Street Journal? The Daily Transcript, that was alive at this time. That's an old newspaper, and I think they saved themselves, Evelyn, am I right? I think they're still going on. I thought they were going out of business, but they're there. So they would advertise the bonds there, and that meant anybody could buy these bonds. You could live in China and buy the bonds. So you buy bonds because you want to get a return. And if you don't get it, then you put up a big fuss. And you are politically connected the way the widow Coons and poor Henry and Clarence and Dolores, all of these people, are not connected to anybody in the state legislature. So this was a double whammy that did everybody in. Anything else? Okay, I think we're there. That's the story. That was very hard to, it had to be a 20-minute presentation, so I was hoping to make it a little bit longer tonight because it's troublesome to understand. It is so bad, you can't believe, and yet it was so well-intentioned. You know, you just look at those 4 roads and you think, oy, you know, you let us have pavement, please, let us have asphalt. When you consider that the first street in Lemon Grove to be paved was a stretch of Main Street, and that was in 1928. So that was under Mattoon. That's the reason that was paved. So we have a famous photograph showing paving, and Main Street stretched from Broadway, which was sort of Broadway, but not really, not a Broadway you would recognize. And then it was truly the main street in Lemon Grove, and it went due south to not very far south, though, in 1928, because, of course, everything else was stalled, the new neighborhoods that we recognize.
Yeah, and his comment down the other side of Mount Vernon where it runs into.
Oh, can I give you a microphone? Where is that microphone? Yes. Harry always has very interesting information. Darling, could you pass that microphone?
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, down on, I guess it's Lemon Grove Avenue now, but going into Encanto, between Mount Vernon and Encanto, there used to be big rock pillars that led up to where that subdivision was going to be. And of course, those roads never got paved like Monterey Heights did.
Oh, very interesting. And the pillars are gone.
To the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, we would know it if they were there. We'd have Girl Scouts fixing them. So, very interesting. Well, thank you, people. Thank you very much. Did you attend the opening of the community garden? Yes. I know you were right there in the museum. Leanna was there. Our hero is sitting right here. Walt, would you pronounce your last name, because I have heard 50 variations?
Okay. Oliwa. It's a Americanization of Oliva, which is Polish for olive. And many European countries, before there was petroleum oil, they all depended on olive oil. So you've got Oliver in England, you've got Oliva in Spain, same thing.
Interesting.
Yep.
So where were you in the Hungry 30s? That's what it sounds like. We could have been cooking with olive oil.
But thank you for the introduction, and there was about 60 people that made the community garden happen, not just me, but 60 other people that worked very hard. A lot of folks, a lot of hearts and hands.
Things are already coming up. I was really quite stunned. Stuff is growing. Yeah, it's great. It is a wonderful neighbor for the Historical Society, selfishly, and a great presence in a public park. So we're very glad. This really was floated as an idea, I'm thinking 6 years ago.
Maybe even 10 years ago, people tried.
But without it, you've got to have a leader for things like this.
Well, and a core group of people really pushed it, and it was a good time for it, so.
Yeah, we
helped out
often
too,
talked
so.
about it.
You're too modest. You've been up nights doing this. No, tell me about it. It's a big deal to get these big projects going, and that is truly wonderful, Walt. Okay, I think we're there. Robert, thank you.
Now, the individuals take care of their own little plot. Oh, I see.
He looks so young. Oh, looks pixelated. Iowa.
He looks pixelated.